auto manufacturer sent a formal complaint to the board and that the Mustang is banned from being at SEMA this year.
They arrest me without, at this point, telling me why.
There's an organization trying to forcibly get the DXP car from myself, and things have escalated kind of quick.
Matt Armstrong buys a wrecked $6 million Bugatti. Bugatti responds by locking the car's computer so he can't fix it. WhistlinDiesel torches a Ferrari in a cornfield for a video. Months later, he's arrested on felony charges. TJ Hunt builds a custom Mustang for SEMA. Ford's lawyers ban it from the show floor. Tavarish spends a fortune resurrecting a flooded McLaren P1. He gets it all back together, but can't start it because McLaren won't provide the software. Something has shifted in the automotive world. The YouTubers who generate millions of dollars in free advertising for these brands are suddenly finding themselves targeted with lawsuits, blacklists, and digital kill switches. The question at the heart of it all is surprisingly simple. When you buy a car, do you actually own it? The manufacturers definitely have their reasons. They're protecting safety, preserving quality, defending brand value, but the creators see it differently. To them, this is about basic ownership rights, and they're being punished for exercising them. The conflict is escalating rapidly, playing out in courtrooms, dealership offices, and lines of code that can disable a $1 million supercar with the click of a mouse. Here's how it unfolded and what it means for anyone who has ever dreamed of building something with their own hands. Starting with Matt Armstrong, he made his name on YouTube by bringing totaled supercars back to life. But when he got his hands on a crashed Bugatti Chiron Pursport, one of only 60 ever made, he found himself up against more than just a tough rebuild. The real problem was Bugatti itself. They locked the car's VIN and told dealers not to sell him parts. And with cars like the Chiron, it's not just about bolts and panels, it's about software. Something like syncing the transmission to the engine needs a special code from Bugatti. Without it, the car's just a very expensive paperweight. His only official option? Send it to the factory in France for a full restoration, which would cost a fortune. Bugatti's CEO, Mate Rimac, stood by the decision. He said the car was too complex to be fixed by anyone but the factory.
And if you want to repair that properly, you can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
Armstrong didn't agree. For him, it wasn't just about fixing a car, it was about proving that even rare, high-end machines deserve a second chance, no matter what the brand thinks. And that's when something clicked, because he had seen this before. He ran into the same issue with an Aston Martin DB12. The car was virtually brand new, with just 39 miles on it, when it was crashed before reaching a customer and sent to salvage auction. Armstrong bought it and tried a fast rebuild, but the project stalled, not because of the damage, but because parts were scarce and the car was electronically locked after the crash. Even once rebuilt, the DB12 wouldn't start. A digital crash event had blocked the engine, and without dealer-level access, it couldn't be cleared. In the end, only the main dealer could reauthorize the car and bring it back to life. Across both projects, Armstrong learned the same lesson. You can rebuild the hardware, but in modern cars, the manufacturer still controls the final switch. But at least Armstrong was trying to save cars. WhistlinDiesel did the opposite. In 2023, he set a Ferrari F8 Tributo on fire in the middle of a cornfield and filmed the whole thing. The video went viral, pulling in over 16 million views. As expected, Ferrari wasn't happy. Then, in late 2025, things took a serious turn. Cody Detweiler, the man behind WhistlinDiesel, was arrested at his home in Tennessee on felony tax evasion charges.
What's this for?
Is there a reason why?
Is this a joke? No, these are guys agents with the state of.
What's the paper? Is that the warrant?
Yeah.
No. Well, he has a warrant. This is a criminal summons
Okay.
out of circuit court.
What is this for?
This is for tax evasion.
The claim? He had registered the Ferrari through a Montana LLC to avoid paying Tennessee sales tax. It's a well-known loophole. Montana has no sales tax, so it's become a go-to move for wealthy car buyers who live elsewhere. On paper, this was a state tax issue. Tennessee going after someone for sidestepping local taxes, but the timing caught people's attention. Why now, and why with such force? Many in the car world believe Ferrari may have had something to do with it, quietly pushing authorities to go after the guy who made a bonfire out of their brand. Cody thinks so too. He says the state wanted to make an example of him to warn others off the Montana registration trick. He even posted video of the arrest where there is no warning or notice, just officers showing up and taking him in. Whether Ferrari was involved or not, the message was loud and clear. If you publicly damage a brand like Ferrari, you might find more than just angry fans at your door. Now, out on bond, Detweiler says he plans to fight the charges and has even joked about moving to Montana in protest. But the case leaves behind a bigger question. How How far will high-end brands go to protect their image, and are they willing to use the legal system to do it? That question isn't limited to WhistlinDiesel and Matt Armstrong. It's something James Condon, better known as the Stradman, has also run into, though in a different way. His YouTube channel, filled with purple-wrapped supercars and constant car swaps, has made him one of the most popular creators in the space. But the very thing that built his audience, buying rare cars and flipping them, has quietly put him on the wrong side of some of the biggest names in the industry. Brands like Ferrari and Lamborghini are known for tightly controlling who gets access to their limited run models. They prefer to sell to longtime collectors who will keep the cars, not resell them within months. Stradman's quick flips didn't sit well with them. As a result, he's reportedly been blacklisted from receiving future allocations of special models like the Ferrari Icona series or the new Lamborghini Revuelto. There's no public notice, just a name left off the dealer list. That same approach also drew attention from state regulators. In 2023, Stradman sold a 2023 Corvette Z06 on the auction site Cars and Bids. The listing showed the car was unregistered and came with only the manufacturer's certificate of origin, meaning it hadn't been titled or taxed in his name before the sale. That raised red flags for potential title jumping where a car changes hands without going through proper registration, often to dodge taxes or fees. It's illegal in many states, and in this case, led to an investigation into how the sale was handled. Stradman later explained that the transaction was legal.
Division of Motor Vehicles, Utah State Tax Commission, Vehicle Registration Certificate, 2023 Chevrolet Corvette, VIN number 31. Zoom on in, VIN number 31. You can also see sales tax, $12,540.84.
But the incident highlighted a shift. Car companies and state agencies are watching closely, not just for who's buying these cars, but how they're being sold. Chevrolet had already warned buyers about flipping the Z06 early, saying it could void the warranty or lead to penalties. So while Stradman's case didn't end in charges, it showed a new front in the tension between creators and car brands, one where paperwork and timing matter just as much as who's behind the wheel. One of the most devastating setbacks for a car YouTuber came when Chris Steinbacher, the creator of B is for Build, decided to recreate the iconic 1967 Mustang Eleanor from Gone in 60 Seconds. He began with a 2015 Mustang GT and was deep into turning it into a custom tribute build. What he didn't account for was that Eleanor is treated in law as a protected character, with strict trademark controls. The rights are owned by Denise Halicki, widow of the film's creator, who has a long history of enforcing that trademark. Partway through the build, her legal team stepped in and claimed the project violated their intellectual property. Steinbacher received a cease and desist, was forced to surrender the car and all custom parts, and had to delete every video documenting the project. Almost overnight, the entire build disappeared from his channel. Even though Halicki's team had legal precedent supporting their position, the outcome was devastating. Steinbacher lost months of work, a large financial investment, and one of his most ambitious projects. The episode became a stark warning for creators everywhere. Intellectual property law can shut down automotive creativity completely, even when the project is a tribute and not a commercial product. But sometimes the fight isn't about a movie name or a badge from decades ago. Sometimes it's about a brand protecting what it sees as its future. That's exactly what happened with TJ Hunt. TJ planned to debut a custom wide-body Mustang at SEMA 2024 through his brand, Street Hunter Designs. The idea was simple: take a regular 2024 Mustang GT and give it an aggressive look inspired by Ford's own Mustang GTD, a limited-run, $325,000 track monster. The problem was that the resemblance was hard to ignore. Ford noticed. Just days before SEMA, TJ received a cease and desist from Ford's legal team. Around the same time, SEMA organizers were reportedly pressured to keep the car off the show floor.
Auto manufacturer sent a formal complaint to the board, and that the Mustang is banned from being at SEMA this year.
Ford later released a statement saying it takes its intellectual property seriously and that it needed to protect the exclusivity of the Mustang GTD for its customers. From Ford's point of view, the concern was obvious. If anyone could bolt on a kit and build something that looked like a GTD for a fraction of the price, the halo around their most expensive Mustang would start to fade. TJ's build wasn't just a custom car anymore. It was seen as competition. Facing legal pressure, TJ chose to pull the car from SEMA himself. He still attended the show, met fans, and showcased other builds, but the Mustang never made it inside. He later admitted how frustrating it was to be shut down by a brand he genuinely admired, but he also knew pushing further could make things worse. The Street Hunter Mustang did eventually show up on YouTube. But what happens to the kit long term is still unclear. What this situation showed is that even in places meant for aftermarket builds, manufacturers can step in and shut things down. When a custom project starts getting too close to a brand's most important car, they don't hesitate to step in. Next, there's Tavarish. He's known for taking on cars most people would give up on, and his flooded McLaren P1 may be his hardest challenge yet. The P1 is a $1 million hybrid hypercar with only 375 ever made, and his example had been underwater after Hurricane Ian. The physical rebuild alone is extreme, but the real roadblock turned out to be software. Like many high-end manufacturers, McLaren keeps its diagnostic systems and hybrid controls tightly restricted. Critical steps such as waking up the hybrid battery or fully recalibrating the powertrain rely on factory-level tools and procedures. Without access to those systems, progress slowed to a crawl, leaving the car unable to fully charge, start, or function as intended. For long stretches, it was little more than a very expensive shell. At one point, Tavarish even considered removing the hybrid system entirely and converting the car to run on gasoline alone. That idea alone shows how far things had gone. Even though he owned the car, fully restoring it meant dealing with systems that were effectively outside his control. This kind of dependency is becoming more common. Brands argue it protects safety and quality, but for independent builders, it raises a bigger question. What does ownership really mean when the software still decides what a car can do? Few creators show the DIY side of car YouTube better than Samcrack. His channel is built around buying damaged, forgotten, or unusual cars and fixing them on a small budget. People watch him because he proves that you don't need factory support or unlimited money to bring a car back to life. That mindset put him in conflict with a brand most people wouldn't expect, Domino's Pizza. In 2017, Samcrack bought a wrecked Domino's DXP delivery car at auction for about $525. The DXP was a limited-run Chevy Spark fitted with a built-in pizza oven, created as a marketing vehicle, and never sold to the public. Sam rebuilt it and shared the process on YouTube, treating it as a fun and strange piece of car history. Domino's didn't see it that way. After the videos went up, Samcrack was contacted by people connected to Domino's franchise operations. They objected to the car being shown with Domino's branding and equipment still attached. He was asked to remove the logos, strip out the pizza hardware, or sell the car back. What started as a simple restoration quickly turned into a legal problem. Sam received trademark-related letters, hired a lawyer, and eventually stopped showing the car altogether. The videos were taken down, and the project quietly ended. There was no public lawsuit, just enough legal pressure to shut it down. His run-ins with brands didn't end there. In many of his repair videos, Samcrack shows how expensive exotic cars, including Ferraris, often use parts that are shared with much cheaper Fiat or Alfa Romeo models. In one case, he fixed a Ferrari using a part that cost a few $dozen instead of the four-figure price charged through official channels. That kind of content is completely legal, but it challenges how premium brands want their cars to be seen. When viewers realize that some exclusive parts aren't exclusive at all, it weakens the image that justifies high repair costs. Sam has hinted at discomfort and pushback from dealers over this kind of repair work, even if it never turned into a formal legal fight. In both situations, the conflict is quiet but clear. Samcrack takes vehicles and systems that brands expect to stay tightly controlled and shows people how they really work. And when that happens, brands don't need to make a public scene. Applying pressure behind the scenes is often enough to make the problem go away. Even being famous doesn't put you above Ferrari's rules. deadmau5 found that out the hard way. The EDM artist customized his 2013 Ferrari 458 Spider with a bright blue 9 cat wrap and replaced the Ferrari badges with ones reading Purrari. The car quickly went viral, especially after appearing during the Gumball 3000 rally, and deadmau5 later listed it for sale using that nickname. It was clearly intended as a joke, but Ferrari didn't treat it that way. Ferrari North America sent him a cease-and-desist letter, demanding he remove the custom badges and branded interior pieces. The issue wasn't the wrap itself. While Ferrari reportedly disliked it, the letter focused on trademark use. Altering the emblems and publicly using a parody name that closely resembled Ferrari's branding crossed a legal line, particularly once the car was being marketed and sold. deadmau5 responded in typical fashion, joking about the situation online and confirming that he'd already removed the wrap and custom badges. He later sold the car in stock form and moved on to Lamborghini, a brand that proved far more relaxed about owner customization and even leaned into his sense of humor. The Purrari story might seem lighthearted, but it highlights how aggressively Ferrari protects its image. From the company's perspective, turning one of its cars into a viral meme wasn't harmless fun. It risked trademark misuse and brand dilution. Rich Benoit is an American YouTuber and automotive enthusiast, known for his channel Rich Rebuilds, where he rebuilds and modifies Tesla vehicles and other cars. He first gained attention by rebuilding salvaged Tesla Model S cars and sharing the entire process online. Watching a totaled electric car roll again was eye-opening for a lot of people. It showed that, despite how locked down Teslas are, they can be repaired outside Tesla's official service network. Then, around early 2020, Tesla drew a clear line. The company rolled out a policy that affected vehicles with salvage or unsupported titles by cutting off their access to the supercharger network. For rebuilt Teslas, that was huge. Without fast charging, road trips become a hassle. Charging takes far longer, and the car instantly feels less usable than a standard Tesla. Rich publicly documented that one of his rebuilt Teslas lost supercharger access under this policy. Other owners reported the same thing. The cars still drove, but without fast charging. They weren't the same machines people had originally bought into. Tesla said the move was about safety, arguing that salvaged vehicles could pose risks. But critics, including Rich and many in the EV community, questioned that explanation. A lot of these cars had been repaired properly and showed no obvious safety issues, yet they were all treated the same under a blanket rule. As a result, salvaged Tesla owners and creators like Rich suddenly found limits on how they could use, test, and even show their cars. Some later reports suggested Tesla quietly restored supercharger access to certain salvaged vehicles after additional checks, but there was never a clear public policy shift. Today, Rich Benoit has become one of the most recognizable voices in the right to repair conversation. Through his builds and commentary, he's highlighted how much control car manufacturers, especially software-driven ones, can still hold long after a car is sold, and how owning a modern vehicle doesn't always mean having full control over it. Looking across all these stories, the pattern is clear. This is really about power and control. Car brands want to protect their image, their profits, and their intellectual property. Creators and enthusiasts push back by treating these cars as things they truly own and can build, fix, or modify as they see fit. This quiet war plays out in different ways. Sometimes it's legal threats. Sometimes it's denied parts, locked software, or quiet blacklists. Each clash forces the same question. What does ownership actually mean today? If you buy an expensive car, do you really control it, or are you just borrowing it on the brand's terms? As cars become more software-driven, this tension is only going to grow. Manufacturers now have more control than ever, even years after a sale. At the same time, more creators are willing to challenge that control in public. Whether through new laws, stricter brand rules, or louder pushback from owners, this fight isn't going away, and the outcome will shape what owning a car looks like in the future. Tuna No Crust, signing off.